It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And we have an incredible show with Stephen Bassett, who's going to bring us the update on the Disclosure Project and what is going to happen with the tweeting and Facebooking to Capitol Hill. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring on Steve?
Well, this is disclosure that goes beyond the disclosure that our listeners have already been subject to. This is getting the people that are holding information that we all have a right to disclose it. And Steve's got a plan that can really work if we all get together and support him.
And we're here at the final day of the StarWorks USA conference in Laughlin, Nevada, and we were all here at this incredible conference, and we took everything to the next highest level. And Stephen, you were such an incredible hit. You did a presentation and a discussion panel. Tell us, what was your favorite thing that happened during this conference? What were the highlights?
Well, certainly, first and foremost, it was just a thrill to see Paula's conference here get off to a great start. Paula Harris, who's put in decades of work to get the truth from our governments about this issue. She's been putting on some events through StarWorksUSA.com. And, of course, this is the first conference being held in Laughlin since the Brown family's conference was taken over and moved to Fountain Hills for the annual IUFOC conference, which is also a very fine event. It will be held in February. But so many people from Phoenix and Las Vegas and from Los Angeles had been coming to the Laughlin conference for so many years because the costs are so much less. Laughlin being Laughlin, and it's possible to come for 3 or 4 or 5 days or whatever, and meet and greet people and meet speakers. And so it was great to have another event here again. And so that was a highlight. Certainly, it was a highlight to receive an award for the advocacy work of PRG in 2013, particularly the Congressional, the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure. To receive that award from the conference and receive it from George Norrie of Coast to Coast. Coast to Coast AM has played a very important role in the advocacy work toward disclosure, going all the way back to the mid-1990s and almost 20 years. And, of course, George has been the key person there for over a decade now. So that was a real high point. It was certainly great to be able to attend and hear the lectures from colleagues like Grant Camp, who's done such important work now, critical work, with respect to the advocacy process, and of course was a witness at the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, as was conference lecturer Steve Allen, who talked about his experiences, and of course Steve was part of the Stephenville event, and many people here who attended that conference, the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, rather, were at the conference this weekend. So it was just a great 3 days, and I know this is going to grow and next year be even much bigger. So my hat's off to Paula Harris and to all of the people that supported her, the many, many volunteers, and be aware that they do have and will be selling the DVDs for the events rather at I believe it's StarWorksUSA.com.
Oh, speaking of DVDs, I know you made sets of DVDs on the citizens' hearing on disclosure, and I wonder what the status of those DVDs are, what's on them, and how are they supposed to work?
Well, I was talking, obviously, my lecture was focused pretty much on the Congressional Hearing Initiative, which is underway, which was launched on November the 5th. This is the third part of a three-part strategy designed to try to get disclosure out of the government by, on paper, the end of February of next year.
What's the significance of November 5th?
November 5th was launched because it was the day after the midterm election. The nature of the Congress right now is that it's extremely politicized and partisan, and there's not a lot of governance going on, but a huge amount of politics. And this year we have seen hearing after hearing after hearing being called on short notice in order for the parties to attack each other over whatever issue was in play. And I knew that kind of activity was simply not going to cool off until the election was over and you had your winners and losers. And so for the next 2 months, until the next conference takes over in January, we're going to have less politics, less of these political hearings. The members are going to be pretty much back in their districts, leaving their staff, nearly 10,000 staffers, to man the fort while they're away with not much to do. And so it was important to launch right after the election when the staffers are going to be more accessible, more likely to pay attention to what's happening regarding this, and to get meetings during that period on the Hill, which will start after the 20th, when I start knocking on doors, so that by the time the Congress reconvenes on January the 3rd, we are in a position to maybe get meetings with the chiefs of staff and even some members regarding congressional hearings. Now, again, the overall context is this. PRG got the White House to put its position in writing in October the 4th of 2011. That position was there's no evidence for any of this at all, or even for a truth embargo. We then held the citizen hearing on disclosure last year, April 29 and May 3, where we put in front of the political media the most concentrated testimony ever of 42 witnesses to the events and evidence that the White House had stated in writing as of September 22, or rather October 4, 2011, didn't exist at all, which then set the stage for the Congressional Hearing Initiative, in which that testimony, all 30 hours of it, was sent to Congress, and it's on its way in a 10 DVD set. Now, this is the congressional submission. It is not a commercial DVD set. It's not going to be sold to the public. It is just for the Congress and for the media that we want to engage the Congressional Hearing Initiative. Commercial versions of this will be turning up and available as we go forward later this year. But what is important is that this 30 hours of testimony will very soon be available for every member on Capitol Hill serving the U.S. Congress and to the media. And over the next 90 days, going from approximately really the 15th of November, which is when those DVDs are really going to start arriving. I'm sorry, the 20th of November they're going to start arriving, through the 20th of January. Is going to be, or the 20th of February, rather. We're going to conduct the most intensive effort ever in history to get the Congress to hold the appropriate hearings for this issue, meaning to bring up on Capitol Hill the kinds of military agency political witnesses which have been speaking to the press and whose testimony is on the internet in many cases. It has been, but the political media have not engaged it. They refuse to follow up on it, to the most intensive effort ever to get hearings for these witnesses. The last hearings held by Congress, where there were 3 or 4 people that testified in a single day, and then there were some submissions from other witnesses, including Stanton Friedman, were held in 1968, long before there was even the remotest chance of the truth embargo ending because of the Cold War. And there's been no hearing since, in spite of many efforts to get those hearings, because since 1992, any such hearings with the witnesses that are now available would, in fact, end the truth embargo. And so the government's position was we cannot allow that. However, those that manage this issue and the U.S. Congress itself has never been approached in the comprehensive fashion that it is about to be approached. So those DVDs are on their way, and what also started on November 5th was a social media campaign, which, to be fair, I mean, in terms of strategy, wouldn't have been possible 10, 12, 15 years ago. But it is possible today. And what I mean by a social media campaign is that Twitter and Facebook and the Internet are being brought to bear to ensure that these DVD sets are received and reviewed. Now, here's how we're doing. No, go ahead.
Explain that. I just had a quick question. So,
sure.
And then we'll go back to this campaign, Facebook, Twitter, and email and everything. Mm-hmm. So these packages are going to arrive to 10,000 staffers. They have all these DVDs. Mm-hmm. What do staffers usually do? Staff members do with things like that? Is there some kind of protocol that you're aware of? That what do they do with it? Their bosses are away. They're on break. What do you imagine they're going to do when they open this package? How's it going to get from them to their bosses?
Sure. Good question. Here's how it works. Every member of Congress has a staffer, usually an intern or one of their younger people, whose job is it to review quickly every single tweet that now comes in, because 2/3 of the House and Senate have Twitter accounts, which is cool because they want to be hip. They want to be with it, right? Every single post on the members' Facebook page, because about 2/3 of them have Facebook pages now, or any Facebook messages that are posted to the site, assuming they allow messages. And, of course, they have staffers that check every single email that comes through and every letter. Some people think, oh, no, they don't even pay attention. No, they check them all. Now, whether or not a post or a tweet or a letter or an email is brought to the attention of the chief aides or even the chief of staff is another matter. But they must review these, because you never know when something is going to turn up that would be of great concern to that sitting member, senator or representative, that needs immediate action. Now, the vast, vast majority of all of these correspondences are handled with little attention. The Facebook posts, messages, the tweets would be ignored.
Well, these are a set of DVDs. What do you think they're going to do when they open these DVDs?
Let me.
Are they going to throw them in the trash? Or are they going to call up their boss?
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
And what I'm trying to say, that the vast majority of all tweets and Facebook posts and emails are ignored. Letters supposedly give a kind of stock response, a sort of standard response. The member never even sees them. The member almost never sees any of this correspondence. By member, I mean the senator or the congressperson. So what we're doing is creating what is called a tweet storm. And what that means is, instead of 1 or 2 messages coming through that office regarding these DVDs in the citizen hearing on disclosure, we want to generate tens of thousands of these messages. Now, when that happens, the person that is following this correspondence will report it up the chain of command to their boss and ultimately to the chief of staff, saying there is something going on here that needs to be examined. And what is it that's going on? The messages that we're directing there have three fundamental questions. Statements. One, please be aware that a set of DVDs of great importance is on its way to your office. Two, we want you to review this material. We want you to look at it. And three, we want you to meet with Paradigm Research Group's lobbyist, Stephen Bassett, to discuss hearings for the witnesses on the ET issue. Now, how are we orchestrating that? It's being orchestrated from multiple locations, but the two chief locations are, one, faxonwashington.org, F-A-X on Washington.org, and the Disclosure Lobby Facebook page, Disclosure Lobby on Facebook. And when anyone goes there, what they will find are the links that will allow them to fairly easily access the Twitter account and the Facebook page of most of the House and Senate, as well as links to their email form pages. Less and less of them use emails anymore because they get too many emails and they want to reduce that. And so when you go to faxonwashington.org or Disclosure Lobby Facebook page, you will find how to get those addresses. Also, you get the basic information of what to tell them, what to tweet them. Essentially, the three key messages that I mentioned. You need to be aware these DVDs are on their way. You need to look at these DVDs of the citizen hearing, and you need to talk to the lobbyist, Stephen Bassett, about the need for hearings. So it's from these two locations that we're generating what we call a tweet, email, Facebook storm or tweet storm. There's already thousands an hour that are being recorded on the Twitter analytics, and so it's well underway. And doing this, we are ensuring that these things will get looked at by staffers. Now, that's absolutely critical, because once those DVD sets are open, and there's 10 DVDs in each one, and staffers start to look at them, even if it's only 10 minutes, they don't have to watch all 30 hours, I can assure you, what they will see is unprecedented. The citizen hearing on disclosure was unprecedented. Nothing like it has ever been done before. And what they will see is 6 former members of the House and Senate with 80 years of service listening to and asking questions of 42 witnesses, 18 researchers, and 24 military agency political witnesses, testifying for 30 hours over 5 days to events and evidence confirming the extraterrestrial presence. And these witnesses include military officers, an astronaut, top researchers, pilots, and so forth. It's the most powerful testimony ever assembled in one place, and they will see the audience reacting to this testimony, they will see the committee reacting to this testimony, and they will see just how powerful a real hearing would be. And it is the connection between the citizen hearing and the real hearings that we want that will be made. And if that connection is made, then I will be able to convince enough members of one of the appropriate committees to, in fact, agree to hold the real hearings, hopefully no later than the end of February. And if we're able to achieve that, I believe disclosure will follow. That's what's going on right now. Are you getting me? Are we still on?
And watching first. Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you catch my the last thing I said there? Are we okay?
I think so. Yeah. So I was asking. Imagine that the DVDs are delivered to their bosses, the staffers' bosses. Of the entire set, which DVD do you think would be the most powerful for the congressperson or Senate member to reach and put into their player and watch first? The
first 2 DVDs are probably the most important. All right? Mm-hmm. Yes, and let me mention that. Just a second. I gotta pull one of them out here. Just a second.
Okay. It's okay.
Essentially, the testimony was done in 20 sessions. 10 sessions, 5 morning and 5 afternoon sessions, each composed of, 20 sessions, 10 morning and 10 afternoon sessions, each composed of 2 1.5 hour panels. Some of the panels were doubled up, though. So, in the first session, day one, there is 3 hours of testimony on the overall history of the entire phenomena by some of the top researchers. Then, in the afternoon of day one, is one of the most important double panels, and that is testimony regarding the Rockefeller Initiative. Now, when they look at that, things are going to get very interesting, because the Rockefeller Initiative, which took place between 93 and 96, involved Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, John Podesta, Al Gore, Bill Richardson, Leon Panetta, people that have run for president since then and are still running for president and have held very high positions. And the Rockefeller Initiative information has been out since 2000, presented to the media several times. It's on the net right now. But these high-level Democrats have refused to testify or speak to it ever in the 21 years since the initiative began. And so,
To our listeners, what is the Rockefeller Initiative?
The Rockefeller Initiative was the effort of Lawrence Rockefeller, one of the billionaire sons, a close friend of the Clintons, and a supporter of the Democratic Party, to essentially have Bill Clinton release all the files in government possession, all the files in government possession related to the ET phenomena, and also grant amnesty to witnesses who want to come forward. In other words, end the truth-embargo. He was essentially proposing to the president in 1993 that Bill Clinton end the truth-embargo. And I can tell you that raised a significant storm in the background of D.C. And all heaven and earth was unleashed to prevent Clinton from doing this. This is a story never told. But the Rockefeller Initiative is known because Grant Cameron brilliantly was able to get from the Office of Science and Technology Policy under Clinton, headed by John Gibbons, 1,000 pages of documents under an FOIA request that proved the whole thing. And those documents are posted on the internet, and the press has still ignored them. However, that testimony and that information is on its way right now to the entire Congress. And I can assure you that is going to be an issue for them. And then on day two, the afternoon session, 3 hours of testimony was presented regarding the numerous instances in which non-human, almost certainly extraterrestrial craft, came down directly over some of our missile sites and turned off the missiles, which were essentially operating completely independent of each other. And there are a score or more of witnesses to these events, some of which have been coming forward. And that testimony is absolutely riveting. And so that is going to be a significant issue before these staffers. We also have testimony on the Bentwaters incident in 1980, and of course the Roswell events of July, and a lot more. So what's happened here is that we are going to put information into Washington, D.C., in front of the congressional staffers and the political media, information that's been out there before, but we're putting it in front of them in a way that is absolutely compelling and will be very difficult for them to step away from. I think we're going to launch a media storm.
Go ahead, Sash.
I'm just wondering, what is it that keeps the media from launching a storm, and why has the media been so silent? I understand that this is going to somehow prod the media to finally start talking about stuff. How does that work exactly?
Well, actually, the media's role here is very complicated. The truth embargo is in its 67th year, and it began back in the late 40s and was solidified in the early 1950s. And it was initiated. And by the way, the truth embargo used to be called the UFO cover-up, but it's not a cover-up. It's in fact a government policy. And so I switched the name to truth embargo in the late 1990s. But it was a national security policy done for what could justifiably be considered appropriate reasons to contain this issue until the government not only could fully grasp and understand what they were dealing with, the extraterrestrial matter, as well as have a better sense of what was going to transpire with the Soviet Union, where you had a number of individuals in our military that wanted to go to war with the Soviet Union right away, and of course that war would have very likely ended up being a nuclear war. So the U.S. government was facing an extremely difficult set of decisions there between 1947 and 1953. And so they made the decision to embargo the ET issue in all ways possible, to contain it within the limits that they had. And understand, the extraterrestrials were not necessarily taking their emails, rather taking their orders from our military intelligence leaders. And that embargo remained in place for 44 years. Now, I don't think they expected this. I do not think that the decision makers in early 1950s believed that they were going to be dealing with a Cold War over the next 44 years. They just didn't know that. Now, in order for this truth embargo to work, the military, they had to have the cooperation of our media, and they got it. And this shouldn't shock anybody.
How did they get the cooperation of our media?
Well, it's very simple. In 1940s, let me put it this way, the first television news broadcast occurred a few months before Roswell in 1947. So during the war, for instance, all you had was essentially newspapers and a bit of radio in terms of what we'll call news. And of course, the American newspapers and the American radio completely cooperated with the United States government during World War II. I don't think anybody questions that. And therefore, their job was not to do anything which would undermine the war effort. And so after World War II, when the U.S. government went to those newspaper publishers, the top ones, as well as the owners of those three fledgling networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and said, look, we need you to cooperate with us again in this very difficult time where we are at risk of a potential war with the Soviet Union that could be nuclear, and we've got an ET issue we're dealing with. We need you to work with us. We do not want the ET issue to develop a public reality. And there was no problem getting that cooperation early on.
So you think they actually were talking about ETs to the heads of NBC, CBS, and ABC or were they being manipulating in a different way?
They had to have, because if those networks did not have an understanding with the government, they would have been all over this phenomenon.
Right.
We're talking ratings here. We're talking the biggest news story in history. And the same thing goes to the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of the major papers. This is the biggest news story of all time. And if they did not have their cooperation to contain that coverage, it would have happened, and it didn't. Now, they couldn't completely contain it. In other words, it wasn't like you can never say anything about this, because the phenomena was happening all over the world. And so if the media wasn't writing something about it, it would have looked awfully damn suspicious. And so what was achieved was a certain balance. And from 1950 on, thousands of articles have been written about this subject in American media. In the last 8 years, thousands of articles and mainstream web pieces, as well as TV and radio, have been done on this issue. So how do I describe the media relationships on disclosure, on the truth embargo? Think of the media as a dog in the front yard on a leash. The dog is allowed to go anywhere in that front yard, but he can never go past the length of that leash. And that is how the media has operated. And by and large, where the leash ends for the media is you can write about it, you can cover it, but don't come to the White House and ask any questions. Don't go to the Pentagon and ask any questions. Do not challenge us directly on the truth embargo. And that's exactly what they have done.
How do debunkers come into play? Do they have professional debunkers?
Absolutely. Everything that the government could marshal to maintain this truth embargo within the constraints of the American system. Remember, we aren't the Soviet Union, at least not yet. We don't have gulags, and we don't round up people and execute them if they say things we don't like. And so everything they could marshal. And so the things that they did were, one, first contain the press. Two, the CIA founded the National Enquirer. And the National Enquirer was eventually used to undermine and ridicule the issue. They put out deliberate misinformation and disinformation through whatever channels they chose to develop, which is easier than ever now with the internet.
Mm-hmm.
They threatened and intimidated researchers and witnesses. And so that's just a number of the tools they used to contain this issue. And probably the misinformation, disinformation is some of the most important, because what that does, it's the equivalent of poisoning a well. You could have a well filled with water. You don't have to drop much poison in it to make all of that water undrinkable. All right? So disinformation, by a limited amount of disinformation, misinformation, they were able to poison the entire evidentiary pool that was being amassed by the citizen science effort.
Steve, you're alluding to actual crimes against individuals by government officials, intimidation and things like this, and disclosure is going to expose these crimes if it comes about. Is that correct?
Well, let's just say this. Most of the activity, the vast majority of the activity of the government in service to the truth embargo will, if it is brought to light, be viewed judicially as legal under the National Security Act of 1947. Believe me, the National Security Act of 1947 justifies a whole lot of quote-unquote illegal actions that would not be viewed illegally, because national security justifies their actions. And that includes overthrowing governments and assassinating heads of state.
Wow.
It's just that simple, right? We dropped a bomb on 2 Japanese cities and killed thousands of women and children. It wasn't illegal. It was justified under the laws of war.
Wow.
So ultimately, do not expect any significant legal outcomes with respect to the truth embargo over this activity. The real question is not whether that act was illegal or that act was illegal, but rather going forward, how much latitude is the American people going forward willing to yield to the national security structures, which are now massive, in terms of their behavior? Because if we don't come to grips with that pretty soon and reform it, I can assure you we are not headed for a good place.
Right. So the Men in Black thing is true, where they're running into the store to check the National Enquirer to see what's really going on, because they start making fun of it there first.
Absolutely. There were Men in Black. They kind of took on this persona because, one, easier to disguise their operatives, right? All right. Mm-hmm. And two, very intimidating. As far as the National Enquirer, this is one of the coolest stories ever. I invite people to study the entire history of the National Enquirer, and if they do, and it's not hard to find, they will learn that it was essentially founded by the CIA as a disinformation source when needed. And eventually they put that into play around 1969. And it was absolute genius because what they created was a newspaper that was specifically designed to end up on the grocery counters of every grocery store in the country, so that by putting photos, the right kinds of photos on the front of that newspaper, damn near everybody living in the United States was going to walk by those photos. It was absolute genius. And the Weekly World News was, of course, also founded by the people that founded the National Enquirer. And so the National Enquirer and the Weekly World News were two huge disinformation sources. There are more sophisticated versions of it. The truth-embargo is a brilliant project on the part of the government.
Well, these people must have a great understanding of psychology and how to manipulate populations into their agendas. I mean, this is pure genius, like you said.
Well, guess what? The gentleman that founded the National Enquirer was Generoso Pope Jr. And just before he bought the New York Enquirer and began the conversion to the National Enquirer, he spent 1 year training at the CIA Psychological Operations Program.
Oh, wow.
Say this is some sort of, special information. No, it's on the internet. It's been published in books. It's known. Generoso Pope founded the National Enquirer by buying the New York Enquirer with money that we're not sure where it came from, though a lot of people believe it came through the mafia, which the CIA loves to use as a cutout. And Generoso Pope did that after spending a year with the Psychological Warfare Division of the CIA. And why that isn't universally known, I do not know, but it in fact is the absolute truth. And it points to the fact that the truth embargo on the ET issue is an extremely sophisticated, highly funded propaganda program by the government, probably the most successful in history. And the American people have to decide if that's what they want from their government. If they want their government to do that kind of ops on them, then great. Let the games begin. But if they don't, they need to step up and stop it.
Yeah, Steve, when you're alluding to CIA cooperation with the mafia, you're talking about acts that have got nothing to do particularly with national security, but have to do with criminal behavior per se. And once you start disclosing, aren't you going to disclose an awful lot of actual criminality, which is really prosecutable under our laws?
Theoretically, but let's be clear. Disclosure that we're pursuing is a capital D word. It is an event. It is defined by the advocacy movement. It is the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence. That's it. Nothing more. The president.
And what would that look like? Who has to say the extraterrestrials are here for a formal acknowledgement?
Yeah.
The president of our country only? Or?
No. Well,
so
ultimately,
Putin come out with it, or the Pope?
No.
Could they beat Obama to the draw?
No. Well, no. Look, disclosure is the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence by the governments of the world. Almost certainly starting with one nation first, and then immediately followed by the rest of the nations. Now, the only issue is whether the United States, one issue is whether the United States goes first or doesn't, but it is by the heads of state. It's not by some lieutenant colonel in the Pentagon or, a member of some legislature. It is by the head of state.
Okay.
And so that is
so
what happens
they're
after
getting these DVDs. Yeah.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Right. Well, what do we need to cover? Let's see, what time is it? Maybe we should do after disclosure after the break. So let's see what we're missing out that we need to cover before the break.
Well, how do you get what is the lobbying procedure? These people get all the clerk gets it. He says, "Hey, chief of staff, you better take a look at this. Something's brewing, and maybe we'll even. How does it go from there to getting actual Congress people to say, let's have a hearing?
First, we ship the DVDs. Then we do a social media campaign to get them opened and seen by members of the member staff on the Hill. Then I knock on the doors and get meetings with those staffers that are assigned to this issue to discuss the DVDs, to discuss the citizen hearing. And then from those meetings, we set the stage to meet with the chief of staff or the member themselves to discuss the actual holding of the hearings. In order to do that, a number of members of the same committee are going to have to go to the chair and say, we think it's time to have hearings on this, we support this, and we want you to do it. And then the chair of that committee, and there's about 8 that I'll be focusing on, will make the decision. See, this is not a democratic process. The hearing, it's easier to get the hearings because this is not a law. We're not trying to get a law in Congress passed. All we're trying to get is a committee chair to hold a hearing. The committee chair decides, okay, we're going to do this, and sets the process in motion.
Wait, is this an ad hoc committee or is this a standing committee of some kind?
Standing committees.
What's it called?
No, there's about 8. An example that's probably the 4 most appropriate committees would be the House and Senate Select Intelligence Committees or Select Committees on Intelligence, and the 2 House and Senate Committees on Space Science and Technology. These are the 4. Just 4 others that are appropriate. And so we'll be focusing on those members. And if you're not sitting on one of those committees, you will not be getting a knock on the door from me.
Okay, and what are you going to tell the Congress person when you get your interview with them?
I'm going to make the case to them why fundamentally they need to do this. And there's several things they want to know. One is they want to know the risk. In other words, they want to have an assessment of the political risk to their boss. And 2, they want to know what are the benefits to their boss and to the country. Notice how I'm casting this. We live in a time, and one of the reasons we have serious problems in the United States, and a much too high a percentage of those people sitting in Congress right now are primarily concerned with their own political survival and their jobs above the welfare of the country. And this percentage is too high right now, and therefore we have major problems in terms of governance. Now, we need to reduce that percentage by getting more people in Congress, House and Senate, that put the welfare of the country above their own job and their own position. Now, that's going to take the voters to do that. But until the voters take care of that problem, I'm forced to deal with what we have. And so I need to demonstrate that the risk is reasonable and the benefit and rewards are great. Now, the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure DVD, its job is to demonstrate to them that the risk is minimal, because they're able to see what the hearings would look like, what the witnesses will be like, what they will say, and how former colleagues of theirs handle it, and they will see that it is just fine. Now,
are they going to have to come out with the resolution?
No. All we want are hearings. We don't want a resolution or any act, any vote on the floor of the House. All we want are hearings. Now, the benefits here are substantial. I will point out to them things like this. 1, if you begin a hearing at this magnitude, on an event of this magnitude, you will rapidly see an improvement in your approval rating amongst the American people. You will get substantial emails and other correspondence thanking you for beginning this truth process, for dealing with this issue. And overall, that is going to benefit not only your boss, but also the entire Congress. 2, sequestered behind the truth embargo are extraterrestrial derived technologies that are essentially being held hostage to this embargo. that will eventually emerge once the truth embargo is ended. And these technologies have the potential to transform the human condition and solve a huge array of problems right now which are viewed as insolvable by the citizens of nations. And so that is obviously going to accrue great prestige and appreciation to your boss and to your party and to the Congress in general. And so that's just two things right there. The message is right up front they're going to hear. And if they question me more, I can just start putting in front of them one positive after another that emerges in time following the disclosure event.
So you sent out how many DVD sets? Did you get any to the president? And what percentage do you think you'll get responses?
If we can get as many people if we can get a sufficient number of people to be part of the media, social media campaign by going to factsonwashington.org or the Facebook page Disclosure Lobby and sending Twitter messages, sending Facebook posts and messages, as well as emailing their senators. You can email all the senators, but you can only email your one representative in the House, but you can email all the senators. If we can get a tweet storm raining these messages down by the thousands, I would expect every single one to be opened. All right, and that's good.
That's good. And there were how many DVD sets sent out again? I missed that number.
538 sets containing 5,380 DVDs.
Wow. Okay, so we've got them sent out, and you're starting to get appointments. And
no, what about the risk, though? That's the other thing.
The
How are they going to minimize risk, particularly the conservative Republicans that now control things? How is this not going to be a risk to them?
This is the beauty of the hearing process, and why the hearing process is the door to disclosure. A hearing is nothing more than Republicans and Democrats sitting at a committee table and listening to the testimony of witnesses in order to gather information to pass better law or create better policy or support better issues. It is essentially a nonpartisan issue. In other words, but it isn't always nonpartisan. All they're doing is gathering facts and asking questions. That's all. So when I talk to these staffers, I'm going to make it clear. We're not asking their boss to step out on the Capitol steps and proclaim their belief in extraterrestrials. All we want them to do is to agree to sit at a table and listen to testimony and ask intelligent questions. And, of course, both Democrats and Republicans will be doing it. They will be doing it in a group, meaning some of these committees have 20, 30 members. And so the risk is really diffuse and, in some respects, not even existent. Now, there is one person that is taking risk here, and that is the committee chair. The hearing can't take place unless the chairman of the committee or chairwoman of the committee agrees to go forward with it. And so they do have some risk at being challenged as to why they are wasting the people's and the government's time and people's money to hold a hearing on this. Well, that's where my work comes in. My job is to persuade enough members of a single committee to not pressure, but convince and persuade the chairman of that committee or the chairperson of that committee that it is in the government's best interest, it is in the people's best interest, and it is his or her best interest to hold these hearings.
So right now, the chair people are the ones that are sitting right now. However, it'll be different chair people if the majority party changes. So who are the specific most crucial chair people right now that you'd really like to have listening? Because maybe they should get heavier tweets.
Right now, we want people tweeting the entire Congress.
Okay.
eventually, later in the year, I'm going to go, through my sources and networking, and we will shift the tweet storm to the chairs, but not yet. I don't want to do that yet. Obviously, the four most important chair people are the chairpersons for the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, as well as the Science, Technology, Space Science, Technology Committees. Now, you're right. There is another dynamic going on here, which is non-trivial. First of all, a certain number of senators and representatives lost their job a few days ago, and they are in what is called a lame duck session. They won't have to work many days because I don't think the Congress is in session more than about 14 days between November the 5th and January 3. But there is no chance, virtually no chance. I mean, I would be stunned. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would be shocked if, in fact, hearings were called before the end of the year. But nevertheless, I am going to be talking to those offices of committee members, even if they lost their job, because they still are on that committee through the end of the year and in a position to talk to the chair and in a position to generate some interest, put it in play, create some buzz. All right? And obviously, these former members that are on the way out still have some influence with some of the members that are going to remain on those committees. Now,
Steve, can one of these chairmen, a lame duck chairman, unilaterally declare a hearing while he's still in his limited 10 days where he's active before he gets kicked out?
Yes.
Ah.
Is it likely? No.
No.
Okay.
And so you have 538 potential appointments. How are you going to schedule all that in?
No. As I said, I'm only going to be focusing. Well, I want the entire Congress to be being hit by a tweet storm right now. Mm-hmm. But when it comes time to start approaching offices, I'm only going to be approaching those members' offices who serve on one of those 8 committees. Now, if somebody serves on 2 or 3 or 4 of those 8 committees, they're going to be at the top of my contact list. Now, I don't mean any disrespect to those members that aren't serving on those committees, but, I don't, as you say, there's 538. So I'm going to focus on those who sit on the committees that we're seeking the hearings with. Now, if any other member of Congress who hears about this through the press, and we do expect a lot of press coverage, wants to meet, even if they're not on a committee, I'll be happy to go meet with them. Because any member of Congress can theoretically support these hearings, even if they're not on one of the committees that are being targeted. I'll take all the buzz, all the interaction, all the meetings that I can possibly get. But as a matter of logic, we will focus on the key committee members in terms of achieving our goal.
Are there any Congress people that you know of that are willing to acknowledge the ET presence and talk about it publicly at this time?
No.
Are there any that you imagine are a little bit more receptive than any others that might be calling you first?
Let me put this in perspective for you. I think you might enjoy this. I think your listeners might very well enjoy this. Again, this, and probably many of your listeners have thought about this, but most of them haven't. And just to kind of give you a sense of how nuts this all is, and this nuts, okay? I think one of the words that you constantly hear about government right now in America is it's crazy. That's crazy. It is crazy, right? Here's the situation. There have been many polls done on the personal views of American people about the ET phenomenon. And I mean major polls. Time, CNN, Reuters, you name it. Okay. And the most recent polling has been pretty conclusive. About 50% of all the adults in America believe that the phenomena that has been reported now for all these decades is extraterrestrial. And as opposed to what the bunkers have tried to put out over the years, this how would you say, degree of conviction is pegged to education and economics. And guess what? The average is 50%, but the percentage goes up as the income and education level goes up. And so if you are higher, if you have higher education, college, if you are making more money, you are more likely to believe this phenomenon is a.
All right, hold that thought. We will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, listeners, and we will be back in 5.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story. I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey folks, Captain Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine QL having all the broadcast shows from 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm. And get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me, David.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. And this is your host, Janet Kier Lesson, my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And I just want to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is listener-supported. So please go over right now to that website, donate button, and donate what you can, $1, $5, $10, $15, $20, whatever you can donate. We greatly appreciate it, and thank you so much for your donation. And before we bring back Stephen Bassett, Dr. Lesson would like to say something.
Well, it's let us say that we are successful in having this hearing take place. How will just having a hearing without a resolution influence the President of the United States to make this announcement?
Back to you, Stephen. Can you hear us?
Absolutely. Well, we're playing chess with the government right now, and what's underway is what is called a gambit. We're moving one direction, but we're actually trying to get something else. And you may say, well, why am I telling this? It's okay. I like to be pretty open on these things. The target is not the Congress per se. The target is somewhere else. The target is the political media in Washington, D.C. Now, here is getting back to the statements I made earlier. For 67 years, the American media has been on a leash. It could only allow it to go so far. And, when I was a kid, I went with my parents. I was only about, 9 years old. I went to visit some people with my parents, and they were talking, and I wandered in the backyard, and there was a dog in that backyard. And I was, just kind of a kid, and I'm kind of looking at it and said something like, "Hi there, fella." And this thing started snarling, and it jumped up and headed right toward me. And it was on a leash. And I thought, I'm okay, the dog's on a leash. Turns out it was on a very long leash. And when it got to me, it bit me in the leg really good. And everybody was all running around like crazy. I learned a lesson there. What is needed and what PRG has been trying to do for 18 years is break that chain. Because after 67 years of being on that leash, if that chain ever gets broken, the American media is going to bite down on this issue like that dog bit down on me many years ago. Now, what does that mean? What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve what is called a media feeding frenzy. And that's when the media basically just goes nuts and goes after a story with complete conviction and intensity. And this has happened many times in the United States. We've all seen media feeding frenzies. Probably the most famous of recent times is involving President Bill Clinton.
Right.
Oh, yeah, when he didn't inhale.
Yeah.
No.
So what the strategy here is simple in its application. If through November and December and into January, we reach a point sometime in January where one or more of the committees on the Hill agrees to hold those hearings for the witnesses that we want to testify, not for their choice, and not some one-day, three-witness show, but rather a comprehensive series of hearings for a decent number, at least 20, maybe as many as 30, 35 witnesses ready to testify under oath. And the media learns about this. The chain that they have been leashed to will break. And they will launch into what I would consider a media feeding frenzy. And when that happens, the various institutions in town, from the White House to the CIA, to the Pentagon, to the State Department, and so forth, are going to be essentially under siege. And the truth embargo will end. And so it's not the Congress that will announce, and it's not the Congress that will force the president to announce. It will be the political media that will force the president
I wanted to take a look at the chain. What is the nature of the chain? Is it the control mechanism? Is it money reward for doing things a certain way, or is it fear, punishment? If you don't do it a certain way, you're going to get killed. What do you think is the main motivator, and is it the same on all levels? Maybe the president of NBC gets huge monetary rewards while the people lower down get fired. What's the nature of the chain?
You're trying to dig down too deep here. You need to think a little bigger picture. The truth embargo was a government policy forged over the last 67 years. And that embargo was intensely pursued by the government throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. By the time the Cold War ended, the truth embargo was almost essentially institutionalized. It didn't need a lot of servicing by the national security structures. It was understood this is the way it was. And so you might say that the chain, the leash that the government has been, that the media has been hooked to, was forged over 44 years, and by then it was just understood that that's the way it was. Now, initially, and the principal basis on which that leash was forged was for national security reasons. The media went along with it because they felt that, in fact, it was the right thing to do. Eventually, though, the media went along with it because they understood that that is just what you did. And so breaking that chain really is about pulling the veil off of this relationship, off of this understanding, suddenly making it. In other words, it's basically the equivalent of what the kid did in the fable about the emperor's new clothes. The emperor's walking around naked. The advisors have convinced all the villagers that, in fact, the emperor actually has a new set of clothes. And then this one kid happens to stand up and say, "Wait a minute, the emperor's naked. Can't you tell?" So what's going to happen is that the media has been leashed institutionally for 67 years from covering the greatest story in history. And what we're trying to do with this citizen congressional hearing initiative is that at some point, sometime hopefully in January, you're going to have a situation where the political media will know, and they do know, that the official position of the White House of the United States, President Obama, is there's no evidence whatsoever that this phenomenon is real or that the government's even hidden anything. They will have the congressional hearing and the citizen hearing on disclosure DVDs will be all over town, where this testimony, which demonstrates the evidence that the government says doesn't exist, and then suddenly they're going to learn that for the first time since 1968, these kinds of witnesses are going to come to Washington and testify to that same evidence, not in a press conference, but in a congressional hearing under penalty of federal perjury charges, to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And at that moment is when the media realizes they no longer have to keep this leash on. That leash breaks, in which case they are now free to do whatever the hell they want, which means to start asking questions of a whole lot of people in Washington that do not want to be asked those questions. And once that
Steve, I'm afraid they're going to give you the same stuff. The Cold War is being renewed, and we may or may not have anything, but we ain't talking because we don't want the Russians to get a jump on us.
Well, let me tell you something. When you're out in a field being under attack by a pack of dogs, I'm afraid that the opportunity to reason with them is over. That ship is sailed. You don't reason with a pack of dogs that are biting your ankles. You flee in terror is what you do. And so they're not going to have a chance to play that game. Besides, the media is too big now. It's too huge.
Mm-hmm.
The truth embargo was started in a time there were no television networks, or at least operating networks, with any television news. There was virtually no radio news. All you had to do was get the publishers of a few key newspapers on board, and you had your truth embargo underway. And then when the TV comes into play, and during the 40s and 50s, you got 3 networks in black and white television, and they're only putting 15 minutes of news out a day. And every one of those networks, it holds their ability to broadcast at all is directly dependent upon the government's ability to give them a license. And so you go to those networks and say, we're not going to deal with the ET issue. You understand, don't you? And that's it. Mm-hmm. This isn't 1960 anymore. They're dealing with cable networks, a vast internet media, and of course a huge spectrum of mainstream media. And even though it's been consolidated, it isn't anything like it was in 1950. And so the idea that they're somehow going to corral all of this media and tell them, okay, look, we know what's happening, but you all understand you can't cover it anymore. Let me tell you something. They have about as much chance of stopping that as Bill Clinton had of telling the media, yeah, you got a blue dress, and yeah, my DNA is on it, but we'd prefer you didn't cover this story.
Okay. I guess what I keep coming to is I get stuck where, getting this meeting going in the first place, getting it, that's where I think you get stuck, like the media was stuck, is that maybe there's some kind of thing in the Congress and all these different departments that if you say anything, you're dead. So they're not even going to call them the citizens hearing in the first place, because if you do such a thing, you're dead or something, some kind of threat that we're not aware of. Have you thought of that at all?
In the era we live in now, if some member of the Intelligence Committee or somebody in the Pentagon was to threaten to kill somebody in the media, it would be on Facebook the next day. Hell, the recording of the phone call would be on Facebook the next day.
Well, I'm talking about the members of Congress themselves, that they might have some kind of thing that we are not aware of because we're not members of Congress. Well, I guess you had your members of Congress. I don't know if there's some kind of threat over them that this is coming, and if you do something, you're dead. Yeah.
I'm as powerful as the military intelligence complex is, threatening to kill every member of Congress is probably not something they could pull off.
Okay. So we got the hearing, and we've got the press feeding frenzy, mm-hmm. And then what? What happens next?
Well,
in your scenario that we have, we're envisioning, because we're actually going to make this happen by helping people get their heads around this whole scenario.
Well, here's it. I every time I do a show like this, and particularly internet radio-based shows, I'm speaking to the president, because I can't. My emails to the president are not returned, and I don't get any invitations to state dinners, so I don't get much of a chance to talk to him in person. But I can talk to him through the media anytime I want. And what's cool is that with internet media, unlike, say, when I've done CNN, I'll get on there for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it's over and disappears into nowhere. But when I do an internet show, I may talk for 2 hours, and the damn thing's posted on the net a few days later, where it stays, sometimes forever, archived, and then linked into Google. And so you put in toppling up all these interviews where I am, quote, talking to the president. So I'm going to take advantage of this immediate opportunity to talk to the president one more time.
All right. Dear Mr. President.
Dear Mr. President. The message I'm going to give the president and his esteemed advisors is the same one that I've been giving pretty much on a regular basis since 2005. There's a couple messages here. First, you're not the only head of state that can announce the extraterrestrial presence. And you don't want to have to walk out on the East Wing one day in front of the American media and the American people and say, my fellow Americans, I'm here to tell you today that the message that was just received by the world from Vladimir Putin is true. And yes, there are extraterrestrials, and we've been meaning to tell you, but we didn't really want to tell you. But now that Vladimir Putin has spilled the beans, I guess we're going to have to tell you. You don't want to be the president that has to do that. Right. And I can assure the advisors to the president that that could happen at any moment. And if they think that they own Vladimir Putin or that he basically does whatever the White House wants, then they need to quit their job and go do something else as soon as possible. That's the first message. And here's the second message. If you've been paying attention at all to what goes on in America over the last 20, 30 years, you do not want to wait for the media frenzy to start before you respond. You don't want to go out in front of the American people and say, I did not have sex with that woman. Get out in front of this issue right away. And so the moment that the White House gets wind that possible hearings could take place, and before the media frenzy starts, you need to do what pretty much every president since the end of the Cold War has needed to do, is you need to go to the Pentagon and cut a deal. Now, I understand that cutting deals in Washington is out of fashion, but it needs to come back into fashion real quick. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is simple.
What do you mean by that?
One of the reason we haven't had disclosure since 92 is because the military intelligence complex made a decision well before 92 to pull the issue out from under the president and Congress. In other words, the president and Congress, with the possible exception of George H.W. Bush, are not told anything about this. They're not briefed. They're not shown anything. They're not given tours of underground bases. They're out of the loop. And that includes the intelligence committees and their chairs and everybody else. They're not considered reliable. They come and they go. They leak. They can't keep their mouths shut, or they're involved in sexual scandals or something. They just aren't reliable. And so they're not in the loop. They are out of the loop. And what does that mean? Well, it means the president is in a very difficult position. The president cannot go before the American people and say, I'm here to tell you this evening there are extraterrestrials here. I wish I could tell you more, but I can't get the information from the Pentagon. I don't think so. The Pentagon has a different problem. The Pentagon can't announce the extraterrestrial presence because the Pentagon works for the president, who is the commander-in-chief, last I checked, and therefore for them to move in that direction would be considered high treason and create a massive constitutional crisis. And, of course, whoever did it, their job would be finished, and their boss's job would be finished. It would be a fiasco, and so they can't do it, and probably would prefer not to do it. And so they have basically boxed themselves out of the solution. And the way to get back in the solution is to cut a deal. And so the president's representative goes to the Pentagon's representative, and they have a nice lunch in a really secret restaurant somewhere, God knows how many floors below the Pentagon's ground floor. And they cut a deal, and the president tells the Pentagon what he needs from the Pentagon, from the military intelligence community, to make that announcement, assurances, evidence, backup, whatever. And the Pentagon's representative tells the president's representative what they need and what they view as the proper way to handle it, and what they need from the president in terms of the post-disclosure world, and how to deal with the aftermath of disclosure as far as from their point of view of national security. And once they have reached an understanding, then the president can announce. And so what I'm saying to the president of the United States and his esteemed advisors is that you need to understand that it is in your best interest to go before the American people, cut that deal rather with the Pentagon, and go before the American people and announce the extraterrestrial presence before you've got 500 reporters chasing you up and down Pennsylvania Avenue with iPhones and cameras trying to get your answers to a whole bunch of questions that you really are in no position to answer. And I certainly hope the president takes that advice.
Well, that brings something to mind, and that is, we know that the presidents are not, first of all, we don't know which president was the last one that was really in the loop. It looks like Clinton, knew a lot more, and he said that on the Jimmy Kimmel thing show.
No, it was not in the loop. No, the last president in the loop was probably George H.W. Bush. Very likely.
Right, but they probably have their ways of finding out. I know Obama's not supposed to know. What do you think he really knows? I mean, I think he knows more.
What Andrew Bashago had.
Interesting. Hello, I'm not hearing anything right now. I think our Skype is a little bit slow. Call dropped. Okay, I lost. But that's all right. It got dropped when she mentioned Andrew Bassett.
Right now, you can go ahead and continue on if you'd like.
Hello, are you back?
Stephen, no, it's me. It's Sean Bell, the producer. I'm connecting with them right now. If you want to keep continuing on about after disclosure, you can go ahead.
Well, I mean, are we on the air, or we just lost Sasha and Janet?
Correct. We just lost Janet and Dr. Sasha. We've still been on the air.
Okay, we got it back. Sorry, we got...
Yeah, I'm glad you're back. Okay. Where were we? Can you remind me?
We're looking at this particular president, and he seems to have inside connections that are better than Clinton's and some of the other... that he himself may be closer to the information than previous presidents.
I have no indication of that whatsoever.
Okay.
I will say this. I believe that President Obama knows there's an extraterrestrial president. John Podesta would have told him. But that's it. Just knowing, you don't have to be briefed by the Pentagon to know there's an extraterrestrial president. Just go on the internet. You can find it out. 67 years of evidence amassed by the citizen science work, and there's 5,000 books, and it's all over the place. There's high school kids that knows an extraterrestrial presence that have probably done quite a bit of research. Knowing there's an ET presence and being briefed on what the government has regarding that presence, as well as access to government facilities, alien reproduction technology, and so forth, that is a different matter. And I can assure you Obama does not have any of that. That doesn't mean he doesn't know there's an ET presence, which gets me back to something that I was answering before we went to the break that's fairly important.
Oh, yes. Go back to that.
I was trying to point out how crazy this situation is with respect to the U.S. Congress. And what I was pointing out was that the polls have shown that 50% of the American people privately believe this phenomenon is extraterrestrial, and this conviction is related to income and education. Meaning the mean is 50%, but as you go up in education and income, it increases above 50%. So at, say, college-level education and reasonable incomes, you may be looking at 65%. Now, wait a second. Let me point something out. I'm pretty confident when I say that every sitting member of the House and Senate are individuals of high education and high income, which means that simply based on the polling that's been done to date of the American people, 65% of every sitting member privately already believe that the phenomena is extraterrestrial.
Right.
65%. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to say anything about it. Doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it. It just means they already know it's real. So that's who I'm dealing with. So the problem is not convincing them it's real. The task at hand is to get them to simply do their job in a safe manner and allow important witnesses to come before them and tell them what they think. That's all we're asking them to do. And so that gives you a sense of how nuts this is.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And so given a Congress that has an unprecedented low approval rating, that is composed of a very high percentage of individuals that, for whatever reason, based upon who they are and how they were bought and paid for by America's corporate money, they are in a position where it doesn't matter what they believe, they put their job and their position above the interest of the American people. And we're going to be offering them a way to turn that around with minimal risk to their job and their position by simply doing and dealing with an issue that they personally, we know from the polls, believe is in fact true. So this isn't as big a hurdle to jump as some would think.
Okay, so we have these hearings, and we've got this disclosure coming from the president. Now what does the world look like? How does it pan out?
Okay, just a second. Let me compose myself for a minute. You understand that the answer to that question, what will the world look like after disclosure, will be discussed and written about probably in tens of thousands of books throughout the rest of the century.
And I think if we can give our listeners and the people out there in the world something to wrap their heads around, like, where are we going? What's this going to look like? That'll be a strong incentive for them to help make this happen.
Okay. Let me give you just a few possibilities here. First of all, this particular truth announcement may actually set up a chain reaction of truth, something we haven't seen in a long time. Chain reaction. One truth sparks another truth. That truth sparks 5 truths. 5 truths sparks 20 truths, and pretty soon it's raining truth all over the country. Now, the effect of that could be to begin an institutional reform process that could actually fix most of the systemic problems we got now in governance, and actually make us proud of our Congress again, and trusting of our Congress again, even trusting the president. That would be kind of a good thing.
Imagine that.
Now, here's where things get really cool. Those, now just because 60% of the, just because 65% of the American Congress probably personally believes that the ET presence is real, doesn't mean they know about the technology. And those that have spent their life researching this issue have come to a pretty strong consensus that the military intelligence laboratories have been studying and re-engineering alien-based technology, ET-based technology, since 1947, if not sooner. And there is evidence we have already derived from that technology the secrets of anti-gravitic propulsion and have built our own anti-gravitic propulsion craft. And they have been studying with unlimited resources the energy systems that operate those craft. And there is a consensus of what that energy system is and how it works. If it is as good as we think it is, the emergence of both the anti-gravitic propulsion tech and the energy tech into the public domain so that it can be used to address our concerns could transform the human race and the planet in 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean cheap electrons. The future of the human race, at least in the 21st century, is about cheap electrons. We have built a society, advanced societies based upon the moving around of electrons. It costs X amount to move an electron from point A to point B. And the way we do that is by generating heat using fossil fuels. And the cost of those fossil fuels, which is, by the way, artificially high, but that's another story,
right,
is so high that it is bankrupting nations, bankrupting families, and killing people by the millions. Who would have thunk?
It's killing the planet by
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The extraterrestrial energy systems may reduce the cost of electrons by 90, 95, maybe even as much as 99%. What does that mean? It means that if it costs you $400 to heat your house pre-disclosure, it might only cost a couple of bucks to heat it post-disclosure. It means
so these things have been kept artificially high and then follow the money. Who's benefiting by keeping all these things in place?
Of course, well, the fossil fuel industry, the nuclear industry, and so forth, have made trillions of dollars from an artificially inflated price structure around a old paradigm energy system. And so none of these companies, none of the individuals that run these companies have the slightest interest in disclosure happening. But and I'm not talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking to the president. We're talking to the Congress, and of course we're sending a message to the Pentagon. So, but as long as the disclosure, as long as the truth embargo goes on, I mean, the fossil fuel industry, the nuclear industry, is happy to make trillions of dollars. I mean, they're not going to complain. But the point is that we're talking transformative technologies, paradigm-shifting technologies, which are desperately needed right away. And so if you want to keep paying $400 or more to heat your house, if you want to pay fortunes and utility bills and not have money to put food on your table, if you want to see the world starve to death or be ravaged with disease because of the lack of water, which would be also solved by this energy technology, then don't do anything. Just sit and enjoy whatever you enjoy. But if you want that technology, you will not get it until the truth embargo is ended, because they cannot bring that technology out without ending the truth embargo. That is not a finesse they can make, for those of you who ever played bridge. The moment that technology emerges, I guarantee you there will be 1 million bloggers wanting to know, where did you get it? And they don't have an answer other than, well, we found it in some saucers. That's it. So we're trapped. The technology is trapped now. And then just to take a darker approach to this, that tech, which has been now studied and reverse engineered for 6 decades, with hundreds of billions of dollars in resources, unencumbered by any political oversight, has been in the hands of the military intelligence community, which means that it was available to be weaponized to whatever degree they wanted to weaponize it without any political oversight. And so it could be an ET-derived technology weapons race going on, leading to God knows what. And we've got enough trouble right now with the 25,000 nuclear weapons that are still hanging around. So again, our whole society, our planet, is being threatened by the secret empire, by the policy of embargo, and by the growing national security structures. How much motivation does a citizen need to do a couple of tweets and emails and Facebook posts? I mean, I don't know. I mean, admittedly, it's not the immediate kind of thing. I get it. I mean, it takes a little intellectual process to sort of see why you need to do it. But the idea of sequestered technology, the idea of the national security states, the idea of massive surveillance, the idea of abuse of power, abuse of secrecy, this stuff has been in movies for decades. Hollywood has been doing everything it can to tell us about this, warn us about this, right? And so, and these movies have been seen by hundreds of millions of people. And so it's not a difficult concept if people realize it's true.
Yes, we've been being prepared in some way by the media, even though, on the other hand, they're withholding it. Hollywood is introducing these concepts to us
media.
in entertainment. So there's some kind of, is that on purpose, or is that propaganda? Is that information? Is that disinformation? What's being leaked through Hollywood?
All of the above. Hollywood media is not the same as the political media.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the head of Universal Studios is not the same as the publisher of the New York Times. The political media, the Standard, Fourth Estate, they're under they're on a leash, as I said. The leash is longer for the entertainment media. And to get back to my original, my earlier statement, again, because of the polling, and because the people that make, that produce, direct, and write movies are educated people of high income, and certainly all of the studio execs are educated people of high income, I can say with high confidence that 65% of all of those people in the entertainment industry personally believe the extraterrestrial presence is real. Doesn't mean they're going to give an interview to the Hollywood Reporter and acknowledge that, though you're seeing some people do that, right? And so you got 65% of the decision makers and the high-end talent in the entertainment industry knowing the ET presence is real. Is anybody surprised that they can't crank out enough ET movies and ET television series? It's raining.
Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, we just lost your last sentence. Could you say the last sentence again?
I mean, given that 65% of all of the decision makers and talent, high-end talent in the entertainment world, believe the extraterrestrial presence is real based upon repeated polling, is it surprised that it's raining extraterrestrial content from Hollywood and from television and movies? You can't turn around without another E.T. movie coming out or extraterrestrial television series. So these people are on a longer leash than the press media. And so guess what? In their own way, they've been pushing this issue out for decades. And so when Steven Spielberg makes Close Encounters of the Third Kind and then does a 20-hour miniseries called Taken on E.T. abduction as well as a stylized version of the truth-embargo, you think he's doing it because he just thinks it's a clever idea? I don't think so. But notice Steven Spielberg will not publicly come forward and acknowledge the truth of this matter. Now, there's an instance where threats can be done. I believe that there are people that are threatened. You can't threaten the entire Congress, but when it comes to very wealthy, high-profile people in the United States, it's extremely easy to contain them. And I think it happens. In other words, if you're a Hollywood producer or director and you're worth $100 million and you've got a beautiful wife and you've got a bunch of kids and everything that life could give you, and you're putting out some ET movies, but the government thinks you're going a little bit too far, all it takes is the late-night phone call.
Right.
And the late-night phone call goes like this. Your private line, you know, the one that only your wife, your agent, your babysitter has, rings at about 10:45 at night, and you pick it up, wondering, who could it be? Because the babysitter just left, and my wife is in the other room, and it's somebody with a very authoritative voice claiming to represent a very important agency of the government, and basically the message is this. If you want to keep that wife and those kids and that wonderful life of yours, that you will only go so far with respect to the ET issue, and you will keep your public position. Otherwise, your good life will go away. And you've got that much to lose, you comply. The people that are pursuing the truth movement, by and large, when you look at them closely enough, are people that don't have much to lose. And when they get a phone call like that, you just tell them to go screw themselves.
Right. So what are some of the benefits, again, with a post-disclosure world?
Free energy.
So we've got the energy, technology. What other benefits are we looking at that might happen? And what will our society look like?
Well, again, I can't even predict what our society will look like. I mean, it's going to, we're always changing. And from post-disclosure, from the disclosure event going forward, the entire world will slowly start to change. And you can talk, well, what it'll look like in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. Maybe I'll write that book. We have no time to go that far. But let me expand a little bit of some things to expect. I mean, I'm going to try to bring it a little closer to home.
Okay.
Right now we're being engaged by multiple extraterrestrial entities, probably from, I guess you could say, different planets, different civilizations. They're star-faring. They're telepathic, and we know from the contactee reports they're extremely skilled in the life sciences. They've been pushing a disclosure agenda. They're very present for decades now. Here's a very reasonable model for your listeners to consider. And it's the model I work from. And I'll be happy to change it when the evidence dictates it. We're in a transition that began formally when we dropped the atom bombs in Japan. That transition leads to disclosure, self-disclosure, in which the world's people acknowledge to themselves via their leaders, through the government, under the social contract, the very existence of these extraterrestrials. And then we're going to be, how would you say, it's going to be ET 24/7 thereafter for a good while. And so we'll go through a year or two of intense engagement of this issue by all institutions, by all people, trying to learn everything we can. At some point, we will kind of know more than enough, and the public engagement and awareness of the issue will be sufficient enough that open contact can take place. I'm working off about a 2-year time frame there. I see open contact 2 years from disclosure. Now, open contact is not the same thing as covert contact. There's plenty of covert contact going on. I'm talking about open, formal contact.
So you think the ETs are monitoring all this stuff, and when they see that the presidents or world leaders have declared that they are here, that they will start openly. We'll see them at the on TV and assisting.
I'm sure that the extraterrestrials have some of the finest and largest high-definition televisions in the galaxy, and they will probably be watching the president announce the ET president, whatever. But yes, they will know. And once open contact comes into play, there is a very distinct possibility of technology transference beyond crash vehicles, beyond re-engineering. In other words, we are in a position possibly to receive from these extraterrestrial civilizations some useful technology. And what would that be? Would it be better air conditioning, better electric cars, more powerful electric toothbrush? I don't think so. If I'm the extraterrestrials, and it is we're finally prepared to see the planet Earth come part of a more extended political alliances, maybe as an apprentice, but nevertheless informally engaged, then I might want to start off that new relationship with some gifts, right? Now, what would be a nice gift to give the human race?
Longevity.
Yeah, Valiant Thor was rumored to have offered, cures for the diseases. In fact, longevity or eliminating death or, maximizing life expectancies. And the response is, that'll ruin the economy. But,
I have a position on the story of Valiant Thor, but I can say this, that based upon contactee evidence that is amassed since the early 1980s, and based upon a simple logical analysis of what's going on, technology transfer post-open contact seems like a very good possibility. And the technology that I would transfer to the human race, if I wanted them to like me, right, and to, how would you say, enter into this new era on a good note, would basically be life science technology at a level permitting us to pretty much cure every disease that we have.
Right.
So for those of you out there who have had cancer or will get cancer, which is 1/3 of the world's population, soon to be 1/2, for those of you suffering from or knowing someone suffering from Parkinson's disease, Atkins disease, dementia, any of the autoimmune diseases, Lou Gehrig's disease, pick any of the worst diseases you can think of. I think the ETs had the cure for those long before the human race even turned up on the planet, and we could have those technologies and curing those diseases, because there is no reason that I can think of why, in the post-Darwinian era, which is the era we are in, we no longer operate under Darwinian rules, except, of course, in business and politics. There is no reason why the human race should unnecessarily have to be afflicted by these diseases. Obviously, we would be more effective, we would be more productive if we did not have to deal with these diseases and we had a bit of a longer lifespan. And so for those of you that care about that, you may want to be willing to participate in this effort to get this truth embargo over, because we're not going to get open contact until the truth embargo ends, and we're not going to get those technology transfers until open contact takes place. So this is kind of the stakes that are on the table right now. And some people may say, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not the stakes on the table. Well, maybe they're not. But let me make it clear. As of November the 16th, 2014, your government will not even allow you to play the game.
Right.
They won't even allow you at the table. You are not a factor. You are not a consideration by and large, other than national security in the whole. And so all I'm saying is, you want a shot at this? Do you want to know the truth about this? Do you want to see whether open contact is possible? Would you like to see technology transfer of life-changing technologies to us, possibly from other civilizations, or would you just like to maintain the status quo? If you're one of the rich and famous, then you're probably thinking, I love the status quo, let's just keep it that way, it's working for me, what's your problem? But if you're not, and that would be 99% of the rest of the human race, you got to think real hard about whether you are willing to do the minimal required to change the status quo in a profound way and move into what I call the post-disclosure world.
Why would the ETs want to help us? What do we have to offer them?
Good question. Why did that young fellow that recently had his head cut off by the newest breed of raving lunatics that is currently on the front stage stay in Syria after serving as a ranger and try to help people with medical assistance? Why did he continue to volunteer for several years as a medical corpsman, civilian medical corpsman, helping people who are victims of the latest round of wars in the Middle East? Why do members of our Doctors Without Borders go into the most dangerous situations around the world and try to cure diseases? Why does any altruist go out and try to help other members of the human race, even though they risk their own life? Because they value human life. I think the extraterrestrials value sentient life. And we are the biosphere, that includes sentient life. Our very existence is why they care.
So which species do you think are out there poised, ready to help? And are they all good species, or are there bad species that are going to try to interfere with them assisting humanity?
I believe the galaxy that we live in has billions of civilizations. I believe we're being dealt with right now by 4 or 5. I think there were a number of others that were around, but they left when the show began back in 1940 because they weren't qualified or inappropriate to be here. I think the species that are dealing with us, by and large, are going to be acting in our interest as we go forward, by and large. I think that some of the things they do are a little problematic, but we don't know their full reason, so we need to withhold judgment. I think there may be dangerous civilizations in the galaxy, but they are easy to contain because the vast number of civilizations are not destructive, and therefore they use their collective power to contain those that have that inclination.
And that's what I found with my information. I just wondered what you were getting.
This is not special stuff that's being downloaded to me by the higher plane. This is common sense that I'm dictating here. This is exactly how our own civilization works. And I think it's pretty much how it works in the galaxy. The galaxy is overall a safe place to live, believe it or not. It is not. There are not endless galactic wars going on out there with planets being blown up by advanced technologies and chaos and murder. No. That's just what goes on here right now, and that's where we're trying to get out of and to get where they are, right? And so most of the fear that's being generated about this is simple transference of the fear we have against our own species, which is the most dangerous species on the planet, the most murderous, the most destructive. And so it's difficult not to look at any other sense of being and say they must be like us. Thankfully, it appears they're not.
So that brings me to a question. We are in a fear-based reality, and it seems to be an agenda of fear that's being perpetuated. Who's really in charge of this planet right now? Are our leaders puppet masters, or is there a higher species or race that might be in control? Have you found any supporting evidence for that type of scenario?
I have not seen evidence that even comes close to convincing me there is a non-human higher power controlling this planet. This planet is made up of about 200 social contracts between 7 billion people and governmental structures. In addition to those 200 social contracts, there are a myriad areas of centralized power involving inherited wealth passed through families, certain religious organizations, as well as corporate centers of power, and other groups with influence, either coming from money or connections. And all of these areas of power are trying to push various agendas, some of which are in concert, some of which are in conflict. All of them are trying to influence the social contracts. In other words, it's an extremely complicated, multi-layered reality. Because it's so complicated and multi-layered, it is challenging for people to engage and grasp. And so people tend to want to come up with very simple, monolithic explanations. And unfortunately, that ain't what it is. It may be helpful, it may be easier to sleep at night if you have a simplistic understanding of this world, but unfortunately, that's not the world. And so I invite people to maintain as broad and as nuanced a mindset with respect to what's going on in this world as we try to sort through this mess, so they don't go up some blind alley and get boxed in and unable to participate. The whole truth and understanding of our world right now is still not within our grasp. In the post-disclosure world, I think we will gain a greater command of not only our past history, but our current status than we've ever had before, and I think that will be extremely helpful.
Do you think we'll get information on the Illuminati, who they are, do they exist? What about secret societies? Will you think these things will come forth as well with disclosure?
As I said, disclosure is a mammoth of truth event, and it may trigger a kind of truth chain reaction in which truth begets truth begets truth. And we could see massive institutional reform, which would include a higher degree of transparency and openness, something that politicians love to talk about but never deliver. But we might see that in the post-disclosure world. Obviously, in such a time, we would see, I think, a pushback against secrecy, secret societies, and abuses of secrecy. One of the little milestones I like to bring up is the day you turn on CNN or go on one of the news sites and learn that the esteemed managers of the great Yale University have just issued a statement that the Skull and Bones Society that operates on their campus has been kicked off their campus. It's told to take their dog and go somewhere else. That will be an excellent sign that we are now moving out of that paradigm and into a much different world. There is nothing wrong with privacy, and there is nothing wrong with people even conducting affairs and business affairs in secrecy. But institutionalized secrecy in the service of agendas that directly affect the public commons or affect leadership should no longer be acceptable in any advanced society. And we are not moving in that direction now. We are, in fact, going in the wrong direction. However, the seeds for the change there and the reform there have been sowed, and disclosure, I believe, will allow them to flower.
Wow. Okay, we only have like a few minutes left. I'm not sure exactly what our time out is. I think we've got
we should go over again what people can do to facilitate this process. Could you review that again
Learn
for
about
us?
the citizen hearing from last year at citizenhearing.org, or Google citizen hearing on disclosure. You'll find plenty. Learn about the citizen hearing. Learn about how you can participate in the ongoing Congressional Hearing Initiative, going to FAX, F-A-X on Washington.org, or the Facebook page, The Disclosure Lobby. Paradigm Research Group's website, which has a useful flash page, is paradigmresearchgroup.org. It is a portal to a whole bunch of sites. Yes, they are dated. They need to be updated. They need to be reconstructed.
Now, how does this thing with tweeting and retweeting
and
work?
that is a private. If you have a Twitter account, then you can find out and get the links on faxonwashington.org to get to the top pages of all the members of Congress, and then you can click on their either Facebook icon or their Twitter icon, which takes you to their Facebook and Twitter accounts. If you have a Twitter or Facebook account, you can then tweet them, right, messages. If a tweet that's already been done comes to you, you can retweet it, right? And for those that don't have a Twitter account, just Google how to tweet, and you'll learn all this. If you have a Facebook account, you can post on the member's Facebook page or the senator's Facebook page. You can also, in most cases, send them a message. And then, of course, there's links to their email form pages where you can send them emails. You can email any member of Congress if you have a U.S. address, and you can email your House representative if you have an email address in their district. If you live outside the country and do not have a U.S. address, you cannot email the House or Senate, but if you can tweet and Facebook post them all day long. And we want people all over the world to rain on Congress these tweets and Facebook page postings, so that there is no chance that those DVDs will arrive in those offices and not get opened by somebody. And thus,
could you explain the retweet where you multiply the effect of your tweeting? I didn't quite understand that.
If you get a tweet or you see a tweet, right? It comes to you, comes across your Twitter account. You can then, using the retweet function in your Twitter page, you can
Oh, well, wow,
that
we're
to
out of time.
other people.
Thank you, Stephen. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Tweet away, everybody. Email, tweet, and Facebook like your life depends on it, because it really does. Much love, blessings, and aloha.